Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, I want to tell you 10 true Halloween stories from deep in Appalachia, where narrow mountain roads wind past forgotten houses, and towns that no longer remember how to turn their porch lights on when October 31st comes around. Out there, the orange glow isn't decoration, and folks still say that if you ever see a light burning past midnight, the house it shines from doesn't belong to the living. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and let me know where you're listening from, because one of these stories might have started not far from where you are. Thank you for being here. Now then, let's begin. I used to live in that town, back when Old Maple Hill was still a name people said out loud. Now I'm 30, working as a freelance video editor, mostly stuck behind a desk. But I grew up with those haunted house stories. And when I saw an online post saying the house was reopening for one night only, I couldn't resist. So I called Maya and Connor, high school friends, and we decided to go back, just to see if the place still gave us chills. Honestly, we thought it'd be funny. Record a little vlog. I'll get some fake screams. Maybe turn it into one of those haunted return reels for Halloween. We drove up Old Maple Hill just before 9. The road still curved the same way it did when we were kids, though the pavement had cracked and moss crept along the guardrails. Maya sat in the back, humming something under her breath, while Connor kept tapping the dash like he expected it to answer. The trees above us swayed heavy with October wind, tossing leaves that scraped across the windshield like dry fingers. The house sat at the top, just like we remembered. Pale green siding faded to gray, porch sagging at the edges, and those same wooden cutouts nailed to the railing. Ghosts, jack-o'-lanterns, and a witch with one eye missing. A rusted chain gate stretched across the driveway with a hand-painted sign, "One night only." Under it, a crooked man in a folding chair handed out paper tickets from a box in his lap. His hands shook. He stamped our wrists with a red star and slipped us each a ticket with a number printed backward. Then, as I stepped past, he leaned in and whispered something I barely caught. "Only go once. Do not return." He said it like it wasn't part of the act. I looked back at the others. Maya was already filming with her phone, narrating like a YouTuber. Connor grinned, holding up his ticket between two fingers like it was a pass to some forbidden show. I felt a tug in my chest. Not fear exactly, more like a memory trying to claw its way up. We stepped into the front hallway, and that old scent hit immediately. Damp wood, burnt candles, and something bitter underneath. The first few rooms were just as cheesy as they'd always been. Black curtains, red lights, fake cobwebs, plastic chains hanging from the ceiling. We laughed more than screamed. I said something like, "This is exactly how I remember it," and Connor answered, "That means it's perfect." Maya caught it all on camera. Her flashlight passed over a rubber skeleton, a motorized ghoul, a spinning disco bulb in a corner. We kept going, drawn deeper into the house. But in the last room, something felt wrong. A tall mirror covered the far wall, framed in dark wood and tarnished along the edges. We stood in front of it for a moment, not saying anything. There were 3 of us in the room. But in the mirror, we saw ourselves entering, not standing still, but stepping through the far doorway again. Connor chuckled and said, "Guess it's a delayed feed or something." I raised my camera to check, but the audio crackled. The laughter from a few seconds ago played backward, dragging out like a tape and rewind. And then, something passed behind us. A figure in a wooden mask, walking slowly in the opposite direction. We turned. Nothing there. But in the mirror, it kept moving, never glancing our way. I should have stopped filming. I should have told Maya to leave it. But instead, we followed the hall to the exit sign, glowing red at the end. That's when the door refused to open. It was sealed with a thick white tape marked in chalk symbols I didn't recognize. Connor grabbed the handle, yanked hard, but it didn't budge. Above us, something creaked, then a paper lantern dropped from the ceiling and burst open in flame. Not fire exactly, but something bright and twisting. No smoke, no heat, just light that didn't belong to anything real. Maya lifted her phone to film, and through her lens, I saw it again. The same hallway, the same three of us. But now, a fourth person stood in the center, same height as us, wearing a wooden mask, not moving. And this time, it was looking straight into the camera. We bolted. Connor kicked through the nearest side door and we stumbled into a stairwell, half lit by a flickering bulb above. The air changed as we ran down. Not colder, just heavier, like it didn't want us to move through it. At the bottom, we pushed through a final door that gave with a loud groan. Outside, everything had shifted. We were standing in the middle of a Halloween fair. Music played from unseen speakers. Strings of orange lights hung between wooden stalls, and kids in costume darted past with cotton candy and fake swords. People laughed. A woman handed out caramel apples under a tent that smelled like roasted nuts and pumpkin spice. Maya let out this nervous laugh and said, "Okay, okay." That was actually incredible. Connor high-fived her, still catching his breath. For a second, I believed it too. Maybe it really had been a weird, immersive tour. Maybe we had missed the actors and overthought everything. We bought cheap beer from a stall that didn't check IDs, sat on the stone steps at the edge of the fair, and watched fireworks crackle over the trees. It felt like we were 13 again, sneaking into something we weren't supposed to find. Connor leaned back and said, "That haunted house was garbage, but the effects, top-notch. Now does a break the accent." Then Maya pulled out her phone. She went quiet while scrubbing through the last few clips. Her fingers slowed. She held it out to me, wordlessly. The final frame of the video showed us walking out of the house, just like we did, except in the background. The house behind us was on fire. Flames poured from the windows. But there had been no fire when we left. I should have stopped her. I should have said leave it for later. But curiosity felt like a hook between my ribs. We turned around to look back at the fair. There was nothing there. No booths. No lights. No sound. Just dry grass and a slope of earth behind us. Where the fair had been, only ash-black tree trunks stood, and a dozen orange lanterns hung from their branches, flickering, then catching fire one by one. I blinked hard. The house was still visible at the top of the hill, its door wide open, and someone stood at the threshold. Wooden mask, motionless. Then it lifted a hand, not waving exactly, more like beckoning, slow, deliberate. We ran. The trail back to the car felt longer than it had before. The headlights wouldn't turn on. Connor fumbled with the keys while Maya kept looking back, asking if anyone else heard that. I did. I just didn't want to admit it. The rustling in the trees wasn't wind. The road down mirrored the video we had just watched. Same angle. Same dips. Same timing. I knew that, because I had filmed it myself on the way up. I gave the footage to the sheriff's office the next day. He barely looked at it before saying the old Maple house had burned down in 1999. Electrical fault. 3 local kids got trapped inside. Place had been sealed since. That was supposed to be the end of it. But this October, 2 days before Halloween, I got a text from an unknown number. No message. Just a video attachment. It showed 3 people walking up the hill, laughing, holding old printed tickets. I was one of them. Caleb and I hadn't been back to our hometown together in years. It was one of those quiet Appalachian towns tucked between wooded hills, the kind where every corner still smelled like wet leaves and chimney smoke in late October. We were both 31, both living in cities now. But that Halloween, we got the idea to walk the old trick-or-treat route we used to take as kids. Just for fun, just to feel it again. Most of the houses were dark by the time we hit the first block. Porch lights were off, decorations already packed away. But at the far corner, near the bend in the road, we saw a group of kids in gray paper masks moving from house to house. No parents, no wagons, no chatter, just the soft shuffling of their feet on damp pavement. We didn't think much of it. Maybe some last-minute neighborhood kids, maybe a church group, but they moved strange, almost in a loop, always keeping a full street's distance between us. Every time we turned, they were just behind another hedge. Never close, never far. I should probably say this now, before it gets too strange. We weren't looking for anything scary that night. We weren't ghost hunters or thrill seekers. We were two old friends, chasing a memory, hoping to laugh at how small everything looked now. We crossed the footbridge that connected the two neighborhoods. It used to feel huge when we were 10. The wooden planks creaked under our shoes, and I was telling some dumb story from middle school when Caleb stopped. He was staring over the side, down toward the creek bed below. "I think they're still walking," he said quietly. I leaned beside him. Down there, just beyond the shadows, I could make out shapes moving under the bridge. Same number of kids, same rhythm, but the path they followed didn't even connect to anything. We kept walking, brushing it off as coincidence. But something was off. The gravel under our shoes started echoing back with a strange delay, like someone else was walking behind us, half a step too slow. We didn't say anything then, but we both heard it. Our steps, then a half beat later, a second pair. Echoes. Maybe. Or not. The trail led out into an empty lot between two rows of dark houses. As we stepped into it, a kid stepped out from behind a tree. He wore a paper mask with a wide painted smile, torn down one side of the mouth. And that mask, it was the exact same kind Caleb had worn when we were kids. I turned to him, half laughing. "Who put you up to this?" I asked. Caleb didn't answer. The kid walked past us without a word. Then two more. Then the whole group, filing past like we weren't even there. Every one of them in gray masks. Every one, dead silent. That silence was worse than any scream. I looked into one mask as it passed and saw nothing behind the eye holes. Not shadow, not cloth, just a depth that made my stomach pull. One of them dropped their candy bag. I reached down, curious, thinking it'd be full of wrappers or chocolate bars. But when I opened it, there was nothing inside but acorns, wet leaves, and crumbled bits of old bark. When I looked up again, the street ahead was empty. No footsteps, no voices, just the dim porch lights of houses too old and tired to notice us standing there. Caleb was pale. He didn't say much, just stared at the place where the kids had vanished. Then he muttered something that made my chest tighten. "I had that same mask when I was 10, he said. The rip down the mouth. My mom burned it after Halloween. I watched her do it. There is no..." And that's when I realized we weren't just walking old streets. Something had been walking them with us. We turned back toward the main road without speaking. The lot behind us felt colder than it should have been, like the air had thinned. Caleb walked faster than usual, hands in his jacket pockets, head down like he was trying to remember something and forget it at the same time. I stayed close, eyes flicking to the sidewalk edges, to the yards, to anything that moved. His house was still lit when we got there. His mom opened the door before we even knocked, surprised but happy. She invited us in for coffee, and we took it. The kitchen was warm, the lights golden, the smell of baked apples and cinnamon softening the edge of whatever had followed us home. For a moment, it felt like nothing had happened. We sat at the table, old mugs in our hands, stories from high school coming back easy. His mom laughed, told us we looked tired. And then the news came on. A quiet voice from the living room TV said something about a local memorial. The screen showed a grainy photo from 1998. Missing children, Halloween night, never found. Caleb got up and walked over. I joined him at the doorway. The picture was faded, low resolution. But even through the static, I recognized them. Kids in gray paper masks, standing in a line near a wooded trail. No names, No answers. Just an old photo and a few words. Presumed dead. Caleb didn't say anything. He just stared. His hand twitched near the pocket of his jacket. I could feel the shape of that night shift again, the warmth fading a little, like the past was catching up. Later, we sat out on the porch. Caleb lit a cigarette, passed one to me without asking. We watched the street. Calm, dark, uneventful. He gave a half laugh and said, "Guess I just imagined the whole thing." Huh. He flicked the porch light on. It buzzed once, then glowed steady. For a second, I believed him. The normalcy was so thick it almost drowned everything else. Until we heard it. 3 soft knocks, evenly spaced, from somewhere below the porch. We froze. Caleb stood slowly, looking toward the steps. I followed him down, careful not to breathe too loud. On the wet concrete beneath the porch rail, we saw 2 small footprints. Not shoe prints, bare and narrow, pressed deep into the damp. Next to them lay a paper mask, torn along the mouth. It looked soggy, like it had been left out for days. Caleb reached down to pick it up. The second his fingers touched it, the mask collapsed like ash, scattering in the wind. The porch light above us flickered once. Then again. I looked up toward the yard. The reflection in the glass fence showed the street behind us. And in it, the children were standing there again. Each one held a candy bag sagging with wet leaves and acorns. Not moving. Not blinking. I never saw them turn. I never saw them leave. But that mask, and those footsteps, they stayed with us. Caleb never moved out of that house. Every Halloween, he leaves a bowl of candy on the porch, even though no one comes. I asked him once why he still does it. He just said, "So they know I remember." Backed in writer, I never went back to that town. But every year, when the kids start laughing outside and leaves scrape the pavement, I listen close. I count 3 steps, and I always wait for a 4th. Before we step into the next story, if you're still here, still listening, with the lights low, maybe drop a comment. Just tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. When I moved to Harlow Ridge, the trees were already half bare. It was a small hollow tucked along the Tennessee Valley, rimmed by woods that always seemed damp, even on sunny days. I worked the early shift at the post office, so I usually got home before sunset. That first October was quiet, just me and boxes I hadn't unpacked yet. Folks around here had a way of speaking without really saying things. My second week, I was unloading groceries when the old man across the street came over. He looked like someone who'd been carved from porch wood, all thin elbows and brown eyes. He tapped twice on my doorframe and said, "If you see a porch light still on after 7 Halloween night, don't look straight at it." Aja. I figured it was some kind of local superstition. Maybe a joke people played on newcomers. I laughed politely and nodded, but he didn't laugh back. He just stared past me, like he was watching something behind my shoulder, and then walked back across the street without another word. Honestly, I forgot about it until Halloween came. The 30th passed with nothing but fog and a few orange leaves blowing through the gutter. Then on the 31st, I noticed something strange around 6:30 in the evening. Not one house on the entire street had their porch light on. It wasn't just that they were dark. It was the way the darkness felt. Planned. Deliberate. Like they were all waiting for something, or trying not to draw its attention. The wind picked up a little, and I could hear it rattling the chain-link fences, mixing with the sharp clatter of dry leaves scraping along concrete. I sat on my porch with a thermos of coffee, thinking maybe someone would come by with a kid in costume. Maybe this was just how the neighborhood worked, and they'd all come out later. But no one did. The voices I heard were distant, like they were coming from blocks away, never near enough to make out. It made me a little mad. To be honest, I'd bought candy. I'd swept the walkway. I wasn't about to sit there in total darkness like some scared child. So just before 7, I reached up and flipped on the porch light. The bulb above my head hummed to life with a low, yellow glow. I remember the warmth of it on my face, and how it lit up the railing and the steps. But I noticed something immediately. The light wasn't casting a shadow. Not on the railings. Not on the mailbox. Not even on my own legs. I looked at the glass panel in the front door and saw the street reflected behind me. And in that reflection, across the street, one house had a light on too, a bright white one, shining out from the second-floor window of the old man's place. But when I turned around to look directly, the house was still dark, every window blank. The porch was empty. I blinked and looked again at the glass. The light was still there in the reflection. I turned my phone camera on and took a quick photo, just to show someone later. Maybe laugh about how the house across the street was haunted or whatever. I looked at the photo and froze. There was a figure in it, standing at my gate. It hadn't been there when I took the picture. A tall shape, raincoat or something like it, head bent forward like it was looking at the ground. No face, no movement, just standing perfectly still, maybe 10 feet from where I sat. I stood slowly and stepped toward the edge of the porch. The light above me flickered once, then twice, and then held steady again. I scanned the yard. The gate was shut. Nothing there. But I felt it. You know that feeling when someone's watching you, even if you don't see them. I backed up toward the door. My fingers trembled as I looked again at the photo. The figure was no longer by the gate. It was behind me, right behind me, its faceless head tilted toward the light, like it was drawn to it. I never heard it move, never felt the boards creak, but something had changed. And now, I couldn't unsee it. I slammed the door and locked it without thinking. My hands felt cold, even though I could still feel the warmth of the porch bulb on my skin. The hallway inside was dim. I hadn't turned on any lights. And suddenly, that felt like the smartest thing I'd done all night. The porch light flickered once, and then went out. I hadn't touched the switch. I backed away from the door, heart knocking in my throat, and tried calling someone. No signal. I crouched down low by the window and peeked between the edge of the curtain. Across the street, the old man's house was glowing again. Soft, white light spilling from every window, like someone had switched on every lamp in the place. But it wasn't steady. It pulsed. Faint at first, like a breath being held and let out slow. I watched it move across the walls of my living room, even though the windows were still covered. It crept, slow and silent, like it was searching. I laid flat on the floor. The hardwood was cold against my chest. I turned my head slightly, and through the crack beneath the front door, I saw the light shift color. It went pale and blue, almost like moonlight, and glided across the floorboards toward me. A sound came with it. Breathing, wet, steady, just beyond the glass. But I never saw a shape, only the light. It stopped just above me, right at the ceiling. I held my breath. If I moved, I was sure it would know. I told myself it was just a car, that some kid had found a flashlight, that I was tired and scaring myself for nothing. But when I whispered those thoughts, trying to calm myself, I heard the words repeated outside. The same sentence. My exact voice, spoken back to me from the porch. That broke something in me. I pushed myself up and pulled the curtain all the way aside. The window faced the old man's house. And now I saw it. Every window there was lit up bright. And in one of them, second floor center, I saw myself, standing on my own porch. My head turned just like it had been a few moments before, light over my shoulder. And behind me, something black. It was not a person. It had arms. Yes. Shoulders. A shape that suggested it had once been human. But there were no features. No face. It soaked in the light, drank it in until the glow around it dimmed. I reached for the porch switch from inside and flipped it off. Everything vanished. The windows, the figure, the light. Darkness rushed in so fast it felt like the whole house had blinked shut. But in the glass of the door, I still saw something. Just a flicker. Just enough. A glow behind the curtain of my kitchen. I didn't breathe. Didn't move. My eyes locked onto the edge of the glass. Then something pressed against it. A hand. Flat. Pale. No shadow. Pushed from the inside. I wanted to scream. I wanted to open the door and run into the woods. But I stood there, frozen, until the light faded for good. I packed the next morning. I didn't say goodbye. I left most of my stuff behind and drove until I couldn't see the ridge in the rear view. And here's the part I've never told anyone. Every Halloween since then, wherever I am, I see it. Somewhere near my window. A faint yellow porch light, flickering like it is waiting for me to look. I never do. And I never will. My grandfather died when I was 14. In his last week, he could barely speak. But I still remember the one thing he said clear as anything. If you ever hear a brass bell in the wind on Halloween night, do not answer it. He said it the way people talk about lightning strikes or sinkholes. Like it was rare, but final. I never asked what he meant. I just nodded and assumed it was one of those old mountain sayings, like don't whistle after dark or never eat from the first harvest. 20 years later, I was standing alone on the edge of Warren Hollow with a field recorder in my coat pocket. The sky was a soft gray, and the trees around me were bare as bone. I came back for a research project. I was collecting samples of lost folk sounds, old fiddle tunes, tin whistle fragments, regional drumming patterns. Warren Hollow had hosted one of the biggest autumn festivals in the South before it was shut down in the 60s. A fire had swept through the valley, mid-ceremony, and left everything scorched. What struck me was how much of it was still there. The outer wall of the old supply barn, a half-buried stone oven, the brick arch from the musician's stage. Everything was covered in ash and moss, as if the forest had tried to forget but didn't quite succeed. I started recording just past noon. That was when I heard it. 3 soft chimes, bell tones, clean and heavy, carried low across the field. They matched my heartbeat. I stood there, motionless, wondering if it was metal wind chimes or some old fence shifting in the breeze. But the trees weren't moving. I should have stopped then. I should have packed up and walked back to the truck. But I thought of my grandfather, and part of me, the stubborn part, wanted to know what kind of sound could live in a place so dead. I followed the path down into the hollow. The ground was soft, almost spongy from decades of rot, but beneath that was stone, cracked and warm. Fog rolled in low around my ankles, and somewhere ahead I heard something like a drum line. Faint, syncopated, familiar in the way childhood music lingers. The barn still stood in pieces. Charred roof beams lay like fallen bones, and inside the open frame, dozens of ash-gray wooden masks hung from rusted nails. They weren't shaped like faces, more like suggestions of faces, eyes too wide, mouths unfinished. I took out my recorder, set it gently on a broken shelf, and turned it on. The moment I stepped back, the speaker began to hiss, then a whisper, not loud, reversed, like someone had spoken and the machine played it backward. Do not let the light touch them. I froze. The air around me felt tight, like a lid just sealed shut. My flashlight clicked on by instinct, and as soon as the beam swept across the barn, every mask fell. Not one at a time, all at once. They hit the ground with a sound I still cannot describe. Not wood, not ash, more like hollow breath turned solid. And then I saw the floor. It was covered in soot-black footprints, dozens of them, leading in circles like dancers who never left. One of the fallen masks rolled to my feet and stopped. Its surface was singed, the eye sockets uneven, and when I touched it, it quivered. It was still warm, and it was pulsing. I dropped the mask and stumbled backward out of the barn. The fog had thickened while I was inside, swallowing the hilltops and turning the afternoon light, a strange, burnt orange. The sky looked like an old photo, hazy, overexposed. And somewhere behind that wall of trees, I heard the bells again. 3 chimes, then silence. Then again. They were getting closer, and I wasn't imagining that now. I broke into a run across the field, but the ground felt heavier with each step, like the air itself was pulling at my legs. I should have gone straight to the car. I should have erased the tape, but instead, I turned and looked. Shapes moved through the fog, slow and rhythmic, not walking, gliding, almost like they were being carried by the music I had just recorded. Their heads were bowed, and each one wore a gray mask, the color of old ash. And one of them, was him, my grandfather. Half of his face was blackened, like smoke-stained glass. But I knew him, the way he stood, the small copper bell still tied to his wrist by a string. I couldn't breathe. I stepped forward and called out, "Grandpa, if you have dadges." They stopped. All of them. The music ceased in mid-beat, like a record needle pulled clean away. My own voice echoed back at me, hollow and wrong, like it had passed through something older before returning. Then he stepped forward, holding something in both hands. It was the same mask I had touched in the barn, the one that pulsed. He raised it slowly, and I swear my body moved on its own. One hand reached out. I was no longer standing in the field. I was within the circle. I saw myself, not as I was, but as they saw me, masked, mouth slightly open, arms slack and swaying. The music resumed from nowhere, soft and circular, like breath caught in a loop. The bells rang again. 3 notes, a pause, then nothing. I felt the song crawl into my bones. My lips moved, mouthing the tune, though I had never learned it. I did not remember stepping forward, but I was dancing now, just like the others, round and round the fire that was not there, on feet that no longer hurt. Somewhere beneath the music, a voice like my own whispered, "Let it hold you." When I woke, it was still dark. I was in my car, door half open, dew forming on the windshield. The recorder sat on the passenger seat. The display blinked red. Low battery. 1 file saved. I played it once. Just once. It held 3 chimes and a woman's voice humming a melody I had never known but somehow recognized. My voice. My breath. Each Halloween night since, that file reactivates. I've changed devices. Wiped drives. It does not matter. It plays at the exact rhythm of my heartbeat. And I always stop whatever I'm doing, just to listen. We'd heard about it growing up, a folk dare called Hollow Step. The rule was simple: walk 13 steps around the fire after the wind chimes go silent. If the 13th step sounds hollow, it means something underneath heard you. It was one of those stories you tell at sleepovers or around backyard fires, not something you actually try. That Halloween, we did it anyway. It was me, Evan, Lacey, and Brooke. 4 friends, a case of beer, and 1 tent pitched deep in the woods near Pine Hollow. We brought a Bluetooth speaker and a bunch of cheap decorations, even strung a fake noose between 2 trees as a joke. The plan was to film a video called Appalachia Legends, Real or Fake, just for fun, just for the clicks. I grew up around here. My granddad used to be a ranger in these woods, and I remembered him warning us not to play after dark where the ground turns soft. I thought he meant mud or sinkholes. I didn't realize there were stories behind it. That night the air was damp but still. Crickets chirped, and the wind chimes we'd hung on a branch above the fire made soft, lazy music. Evan laughed and said, "All right, let's summon something." He stepped up and started counting his walk around the fire. 1, 2, 3, The fire cracked. 4, 5, 6. A beer can hissed as Brooke popped it open. 7, 8, 9. We were all grinning, half spooked, half entertained. 10, 11, 12. Then the wind chimes stopped. Just stopped. No gust. No sudden hush. They just went still, like someone had gripped them mid-swing. Evan froze on his last step. He turned toward me and whispered, "That was 12. Right." And Terry with bagged. I should have said stop. I should have broken the tension with a joke. But I waited. He stepped again. 13. The sound under his foot was different. Not dirt. Not leaves. A hollow thump, deep and strange, like the lid of a drum stretched tight below the earth. We all laughed. Nervous. Too loud. Brooke tossed an empty can into the woods and waited for the echo. It bounced back. Once. Twice. 3 times. Lacey frowned. "There's someone out there," she said. "That wasn't us." "Is that?" But the woods were dead silent now. No insects. No breeze. Not even branches creaking. I swept my flashlight in a slow circle and saw the fake noose swinging lightly, like it had just been touched. And then I heard it. A 5th footstep. Slightly behind. Slightly delayed. Not echo. We were 4 people. But there were 5 footfalls now, one dragging slightly behind the others. We turned our lights toward the trees, and that's when we saw it. A circle of gray ash. Perfect and smooth. Maybe 6 feet across. I swear it hadn't been there before. And inside it, nothing. No leaves. No debris. Just bare dirt, like something had been dancing there for years. Brooke crouched down to take a picture. Probably some old ritual site, she joked. When she looked at the photo, she went quiet, hand trembling. She passed me the phone. There were 5 shadows. We were only 4. And the 5th was standing in the center, face smooth and melted, like candle wax. Lacey screamed before any of us could react. She was clawing at her neck. The fake rope we'd hung between the trees had dropped down and looped around her shoulders. It tightened without warning, not like it was pulled, but like it had grown smaller all at once. Evan and I rushed forward, yanked it loose, and it fell apart in our hands like dried grass. None of us were laughing anymore. We swept the area with our lights again. The ash circle was still there, but now it had 13 clear footprints in the dust. I counted twice. 13. Even though we were just 4. The space where the 5th should be was centered, like someone had stood still while the others circled around them. We gathered our things fast. Evan said the car was just a few minutes up the trail and we should go now, before we scared ourselves worse. Brooke looked pale. Lacey kept her hands near her throat. Not speaking, we started walking. The trail felt longer this time. Branches arched overhead like ribs. The path curved in ways I didn't remember, but Evan kept pointing ahead, saying he could see the headlights. Sure enough, in the distance, 2 pale beams cut through the dark. But something was off. The light wasn't white. It was orange, and it flickered. I slowed down. That doesn't look right, I said, but nobody stopped. The light grew brighter as we approached, but it danced too much. Like fire. When we got close enough to see the car, it was sitting exactly where we'd parked it. Doors shut, windows dark. But something about it felt too still, too posed. We jumped in anyway. Locked the doors. Evan fired up the heater. For a moment, it felt like we had made it. He laughed. Short. Shaky. Told you. All just Halloween drama. BS fader. I nodded, tried to breathe, but then I glanced in the rearview mirror. The fire was still burning behind us. A small bonfire, just like the one we'd built, but surrounded now by movement. Something, or someone, was pacing around it, slow and steady, One step behind the last. Brooke saw it next. She whispered, "That's not our fire." Is why. I turned to look. The flame outside rose fast. Too fast. It climbed nearly to the height of the windshield in one breath, and glowed so bright it washed everything in orange. And then, out of the center, someone stepped through. A figure burned black at the edges, like they had walked through the flame itself. They didn't flinch, didn't blink, just moved straight toward the hood of the car. Lacey gasped. The rope around her neck, which we had cut, was back, tightening again. We scrambled to unbuckle her, to push open the door, but the locks clicked on their own and refused to lift. The car filled with heat, a smell like burned leaves and something else. Hair. The door flung open by force. Wind rushed in, then silence. Just like that, the fire vanished. No heat, no flame, only ash across the hood, and the faint scent of something once alive, now gone. When morning came, the sheriff found no sign of our car. No tent, no tire tracks. Just a blackened circle in the woods and a dozen steps burned into the ground. 13, if you counted the one in the center. My phone was in my lap. The last video cut off at Evan's 12th step. Then, one still frame, a bare foot pressed against the lens, as if something stepped forward to finish the count. That night, back at my apartment, I heard my wind chimes fall quiet. The windows were closed. There was no breeze. But something had heard me. That one hit a little different. If these stories mean something to you, leave a like, subscribe, or share this video with someone who'd stay up to hear it too. And if you've got a true horror story of your own, my email's in the description. Now, story 6. After my brother died, I moved back into our mother's old house in the hills of Tennessee. The place sat on the edge of a narrow gravel road that ran beside a ridge of yellowing woods. Only 3 other houses dotted that stretch, and all of them sat too far apart to call neighbors. Still, I checked the mailbox every morning like it mattered. I know that sounds odd, but the habit stuck with me, like brushing your teeth or locking the door. Even when you're alone, you keep doing what you used to do when you weren't. I didn't expect anything to show up. No one really knew I'd moved back. The first letter came on a Tuesday, early October. I'd stepped out barefoot, coffee in hand, fog still hanging low over the ditch by the trees. The mailbox was cold to the touch, slightly wet with dew. Inside was a yellowed envelope, brittle at the corners. No return address. It just said, "For the one still here. Things. He has 6 and Selvin always." I stood there a while, just holding it. There was something about the ink. Faded. Almost smudged like it had soaked into the paper years ago. But the envelope hadn't been weathered. No moisture. No dirt. As if someone had placed it there seconds before I came out. I opened it. There were only 2 lines inside. "You left the porch light on again. You know, I see better in the dark." It's a backed. I thought someone was messing with me. Some backwoods prank. Or a strange leftover note meant for someone else. But the handwriting, it looked like my brother's. Loopy S's. The sharp hook at the end of his Y's. It tugged at something low in my chest. That night I kept the lights off. Half to test a theory, and half because it made my heart race less. I even unplugged the lamp in my bedroom, just in case. The next morning, there was another letter. Same paper, same handwriting. But this time the return address line read, Cedar Hill Junction. I'd never heard of it, even growing up here. Still, I got in the truck and drove out past the fire tower, where the road forks by the broken mile marker. Cedar Hill wasn't a place. It was just a dirt pull-off that dead-ended at a line of trees. There was a mailbox there. Just one. Rusted shut except for the lid, which creaked open when I touched it. Inside were 3 envelopes. All sealed. All with my name. The moment I lifted the first one, the lid slammed shut behind me. I flinched hard, not from the noise, but because it happened 3 times in quick succession, like someone was standing behind me, slapping it open and closed. I drove home with the letters in the passenger seat, not opening them until night. I don't know why I waited. Maybe I was hoping they'd disappear. Maybe I wanted proof I was imagining things. They didn't disappear. The letters weren't threatening. They read like short notes. Observations. One said, "You made oatmeal again. You always forget the salt." Another, "That old sweater doesn't fit anymore, but it still makes you feel safe. Is not non." The last one said, "Don't leave the porch light on tonight." I saw it again. Incree. I dropped it. The paper didn't flutter like you'd expect. It landed flat, as if the air itself didn't dare move. I should have told someone, called someone. But grief makes you keep things quiet. It teaches you that not everything unspoken is unfinished. That was the first week. By the weekend, I was checking the box every evening and every morning. I told myself I'd stop, but I kept going back. I couldn't help it. The letters kept coming, and they started to mention things I hadn't even said aloud. I remember one line exactly. "You sat up reading until 2:17. That book always bored me." I hadn't told a soul I was reading again. I hadn't touched a book in months. That night, I found the porch light on, even though I was sure I'd left it off. I stood by the window, watching it, waiting to see if something moved in the trees. But nothing did. The next letter ended with this: "Try opening the east window. I want to see you one more time." This had not now a self. I didn't sleep that night. I burned the letters. All of them. Stood in front of the fireplace. Watched the flames curl the edges. Blacken the ink until it curled in on itself. I even crushed the ashes into the coals, just to be sure. The next morning, the mailbox was full of soot. Not just inside, but smeared along the metal like fingers had dug through it. Sitting on top was a single folded paper, written by hand in the same slant I now recognized without question. It said, "Ash was never what made me disappear." Inapplaceably, that was when something shifted. I stopped pretending this was a trick or prank. Whatever was writing these letters knew things I hadn't spoken, hadn't shared, hadn't even accepted. I didn't feel scared exactly. I felt watched. I started sleeping with every light on. Kitchen, hallway, bathroom, even the garage. It didn't matter. Every morning the mailbox held another envelope, each one tighter in tone, each one closer to my thoughts. One letter had just 2 lines. "You thought about leaving last night, but you didn't. It's not with the desk hollows." I quit going outside after dark, pulled all the curtains, tried to pretend the box wasn't there, but I still heard it, always around 3 in the morning, that soft, slow creak of metal lifting. Sometimes it repeated, once, then twice, then a third time. I filled the mailbox with stones, big ones, stacked them until the lid bulged. But the next morning, the stones were gone, not tossed aside, gone. And the envelope was resting in the hands of the angel statue that sat near the porch steps, right in her open palms like an offering. That day I didn't open the letter. I left it there and closed the blinds. But that night, I couldn't help myself. I cracked the east window just an inch, just to listen. Nothing moved. No wind, no insects, just the hush of leaves gathering in the ditch and the occasional snap of a twig too far to see. I should not have waited for anything that night. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels full, like breath held behind the trees. That was what the air felt like on Halloween night. I sat by the window, same place I always read. No book this time, just a lamp casting a low circle of light onto the rug. I could see the mailbox from there, tilted slightly under the weight of age. When the clock hits 11:13, I am still watching. The lid opens. Nothing touches it, but it opens. slowly, without rush. Then it lets go, and a single sheet slides out, catching no wind, no breeze. Yet it lifts, glides across the short yard, and presses gently against the window pane. I do not move. I just stare. The page is blank except for one sentence, written near the top. Now it's your turn to send one back. That were definite test. I left the next morning, packed a bag, drove straight to Knoxville, rented an apartment on the 3rd floor with a mailbox locked behind a metal grid. I didn't tell anyone why. I didn't even forward my address. I sealed the old box shut before I left, nailed it closed and wrapped it in thick plastic. But still, sometimes, in the middle of the night, I swear I hear that creak. And every Halloween morning, without fail, I find a pale envelope in my city mailbox. No stamp, no writing, nothing but the soft imprint of fingers and soot. Do not bring any of those things back in the house, the landlord said as she handed us the keys. They belonged to the woodcarver who lived by the ridge. He passed years ago, and I never moved his things. She didn't smile, just nodded toward the shed before driving off. I should have listened to her. Emma and I had rented the cabin for October, hoping to film a series for our little vlog. Decorating, Appalachian style. That was the title we were pitching. The place was tucked right against the edge of a narrow pine forest, where the wind stirred constantly even when the air felt still. In the shed, out back, we found the masks. 5 of them, all carved by hand. Faces smooth but strangely alive. One smiled, wide and crooked like it knew a joke it wouldn't tell. Another frowned so deep I could feel it in my gut. Emma held one up to the light and said it looked like something from an old folk tale. We brought them in anyway, cleaned them off, hung them in a neat row above the fireplace. I added soft yellow bulbs to the wall sconces, just enough to make the whole living room glow warm for the camera. When we filmed the first clip, it looked perfect, rustic, a little eerie, but charming. The first strange thing I noticed was the smile. That mask, the one with the stretched grin, looked different in the morning than it had the night before. Not drastically, just enough that I paused. The smile seemed softer somehow, like it had relaxed while we slept. By evening, it was sharp again. Not wider, just crueler. Emma said I was imagining it. Wood shifts, she told me, brushing it off. Temperature, humidity, that kind of thing. I nodded, but I kept watching it. On the first night, at exactly 9 o'clock, there came a knock at the front door. 3 knocks. Even, spaced out, like someone was waiting between each one. I opened the door and found no one. Just wind rolling leaves across the porch. But at my feet, tucked under the mat, was a scrap of folded paper. It said, "The one who borrows must return. Then again, he's my one Fred." Emma laughed when I showed her. "Kids," she said. "Town this small. They probably think it's hilarious. We're city folks. This wising with pay." I laughed too, but it didn't feel funny. The knocks came again the next night. Same time. Same rhythm. I didn't open the door this time. I just stood in the dark hallway, listening. The next morning, one of the masks was missing. Its place on the wall was marked by a black smudge, like the hook had been singed. The other masks were still there, still staring. I called Emma into the room. She frowned but said maybe it fell and broke, and we just hadn't noticed. We searched the house. Nothing. That night, the knocks came louder. Still 3 of them. Still patient. Emma fell asleep early, but I stayed up, pacing the hall. I heard movement on the porch around midnight. Slow, steady footsteps, not walking exactly, more like dragging. I peeked out the front window and saw no one, just the wind, but the porch light flickered as if someone had passed beneath it. Then, just before dawn, I saw a figure. It stood at the edge of the woods, barely visible through the trees. Tall, thin, shoulders hunched under a heavy cloak. Its head was wrapped in black cloth. In its hand, I swear it held a wooden mask, the same shape as the one that vanished from our wall. Lightning cracked across the sky. In that brief flash, I saw it clearer. The mask still had the string attached, still curled, like it had been pulled from the nail in our living room. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, called Emma's name. She woke groggy, confused. But before I could explain, the lights went out, all of them at once. We ran through the house trying every door. The back one wouldn't budge, and the side door we hadn't even used yet was jammed from the outside. I checked my pocket. The keys were still there, but they didn't help. Every lock was sealed like it had grown shut. That was when we heard the knocking again. But it wasn't coming from the front door this time. It echoed through the walls. 3 dull thuds, slow and heavy, like something was inside the wood. Not behind it. Inside it. Emma clung to my arm. She was shaking. I tried to sound calm, told her it was probably an animal, or maybe someone trying to scare us. But the truth is, I had never felt anything like that before. Then everything stopped. No knocks. No flickering. Just stillness. We sat on the floor of the living room with a candle between us. Emma whispered, "Maybe someone just wanted the masks back. We give them back in the morning and leave." They sapered down. It almost made sense. I gathered the masks from the wall, one by one. The nails came out easier than I expected. Maybe they had been waiting. I laid them gently on the table. That is when I noticed it. There were 5 masks. I was sure we had brought in only 4. The 5th sat perfectly in the row, like it had always belonged. It was unlike the others. Darker wood, smaller eyes, and it wore a smile so sharp it looked painful. "I don't remember that one," Emma said. Voice, barely a whisper. Neither did I. I should not have burned it. I lit the old oil lantern by the table. Something about fire felt safer than light bulbs now. But as soon as the wick caught, the flame pulsed and dimmed. The 5th mask seemed to shimmer in the glow, as if the grin were deepening. Then the candle died. I felt breath on my neck. Not wind, not air. Breath. I turned slowly, and he is there, standing right behind me. The man in the cloak, closer now, taller than I remembered. The black fabric covers his head, but one hand lifts a mask not from the table, but already on his face. He wears the smiling one. "I came to take it back," he says. His voice splits in layers, like 2 people are speaking from one mouth, or a crowd is echoing behind him. I grab the lantern and throw it hard. The glass shatters against the floorboards. Fire leaps up, bright and sudden. When I look again, he is gone. Only smoke remains, curling around the table. And on the wall behind the smoke, a black mark spreads in the shape of a mask. Eyes and mouth burned into the wood. We left the next morning. Took only what we could carry. Never looked back. A year later, in our new apartment, Emma found a wooden mask at a thrift shop. She thought it was funny. Said it would make a good Halloween piece. I did not argue. But I did not sleep that night. At exactly 9 o'clock, someone knocked on the door. 3 times. When I opened it, the hallway was empty, except for a folded scrap of paper, edges burned. It read, "Returned once, now borrowed again." And there no. 7 stories down, and just 1 more to go. Thanks for staying with me this far. Really. The last one. It stays with me. Let's begin. I drive delivery routes through the mountains, mostly between state lines. Sometimes I take side roads just to break the routine. On the morning of October 29, I was heading through Roane County, trying to cut across to Oak Ridge. GPS kept spinning, the arrow circling like it had lost the ground beneath it. I only meant to stop for a few photos. The trees were turning, gold and rust shaking loose in the wind. I figured I had time. The road was clear, and the air smelled like cold pine. Then I saw it. A narrow turnoff just past a collapsed guardrail. No warning signs. No pavement wear. But a wooden board stuck crooked in the brush read Old Briar Road. I slowed. It was not listed on my map, and GPS still couldn't lock on. But the road itself looked fine. Paved. Quiet. Dipped in soft leaves, like it hadn't seen tires in years. I thought it might loop around faster than the main route. And maybe, just maybe, it would make a good backdrop for a fall photo. So, I turned. As soon as I did, the truck clock slipped back 2 hours. I noticed it right away because I checked the time obsessively on jobs. 1 minute it was 11:38. Then the moment I eased past the first bend, it said 9:42. I blinked. Checked my phone. No signal. The trees closed in quickly. Branches from both sides nearly touched over the roof. The colors looked darker somehow, more shadow than light. I cracked the window for air. That was when I heard it. A voice. At first I thought it was just the wind brushing the side mirrors. But then I heard it again. Soft. Like a hum or an old song half forgotten. Words I couldn't fully catch. Except for one line. Repeated in a woman's voice. Keep the lights on. I turned the volume dial on the radio. Hoping for static. Nothing. Just silence. I looked in the rearview mirror. The road behind was already gone, replaced by thick woods and a long ribbon of red dirt. That was the second thing I noticed. The pavement had ended without me feeling it. One moment I was on asphalt, then it was packed earth, reddish and cracked, like clay left too long in the sun. I slowed down and looked for a place to turn around. But there was nowhere to turn. Branches crowded the edge like walls, and the road had narrowed into a kind of tunnel. I kept driving. Slow now. Alert. The sun looked lower than it should have. The light had gone yellow and slanted, like evening had arrived early. Then I saw the house. Small. 1 story. Covered in dead vines and lichen. The front door was open. Just barely. And the porch light glowed the way cheap bulbs do when they buzz. No car out front. No sound from inside. But someone had been there. I got out, engine still running, stepped onto the porch and saw what was sitting just inside a table with a single piece of paper, yellowed and creased. It was a hand-drawn map, scribbled, not printed. At the top, in faded red ink, someone had written, "If you're reading this, do not turn the engine off." I backed away, looked at the truck, still idling, still there. Then I turned and looked through the house window again. There was another truck parked out front now. Same color, same shape, same decals. But the lights were on, and the engine was running. And I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. They were staring straight ahead, unmoving, not blinking, not breathing. It was me. I stumbled back off the porch, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear the wind anymore. That truck, my truck, was still where I had parked it. But now, there was a second one, identical in every detail, down to the scuff on the rear bumper. I looked between them, disoriented. Which one had I come in? My boots hit the gravel as I ran toward the one on the right. The license plate matched mine. The keys were in the ignition. I didn't even close the door before I slammed my foot on the gas. The road stretched forward, twisting between trees like it was trying to slow me down. I gripped the wheel, eyes fixed on the next bend, but then I passed a sign on the right, a crooked wooden board that read, Old Briar Road, 3 miles. Not again. A few minutes later, I passed it again. Every curve felt familiar. Every turn led to the same view. Even the cracks in the dirt looked like repeats. In the rearview mirror, headlights flared to life. They were behind me. Another truck. Same shape. Same light pattern. It followed at a distance but never lost me. Every turn I made, it mirrored. Every hill I climbed, it climbed too. I floored the gas. Trees blurred. Then I heard it, not from outside but inside the cab. A whisper from the air vent. Dry. Thin. Too close. Keep the lights on, I shouted, slamming my fist into the dash. The headlights blinked. The windshield fogged for a split second, as if something breathed across it. I flipped the brights on. The forest lit up like a curtain lifting, and standing in the center of the road was a figure. It looks just like me. Same jacket, same boots, but the face is pale, dry like paper left in the sun, and the eyes are deep black hollows. The mouth stretches open, but there is no sound. Only the noise of engines, mine and his, roaring at once. I do not slow down. I aim straight ahead and close my eyes. When I open them, the trees are gone. The road is gone. I am parked in the middle of a field soaked in fog. Engine, coughing its last. The sky has turned a deep gray blue, like just before dawn. I do not remember how I stopped. The truck is out of fuel. I check my phone. Signal is back. GPS says I am on Highway 48, 7 miles south of where I started. The dashboard clock reads 3:04 a.m. I step out on shaky legs, walk around to the back. In the truck bed, something is resting just under the tarp. An old folded map, the same one from the house. The corner is burned, and across the bottom, written in black ash, is a single sentence. You turn the wrong way back. This morning felt like every other. I got out of bed, brushed my teeth, turned on the radio, like always. Leaves drifted past the front step, thick and gold, and the sky was that dull October gray that never really brightens. The radio voice said, "Today is October 31st. Expect cold air and morning fog across Roane County. Badadisan Ward." I didn't think much of it. I worked the late shift at the corner store, so mornings were slow for me. I made some coffee, flipped through a magazine I'd already read 3 times, and leaned on the railing to watch the neighborhood wake up. Then I saw them. The same group of kids in costume walking past my gate. One with fairy wings, one dressed like a robot, and the last wearing a pumpkin on his head. Same outfits. Same little girl dropping her bag. Same mom picking it up and waving at me like she knew me. I had seen that scene before. Yesterday. And the day before that. I know how that sounds. But when I stepped back inside, the wall calendar still read October 31st. Torn at the bottom corner, just like it was the day before. I had replaced the battery in the clock twice already, but the hands always froze at 7:14 every night. The microwave clock agreed, even though I'd unplugged it for an hour the other day just to be sure. At first, I thought maybe I was just tired. I work nights, I live alone, and sometimes things blur. But by noon, the radio was still playing the same message. Same woman's voice. Same slight rasp when she said the word fog. Same soft cough before she signed off. I tried turning it off, but the voice kept coming, echoing through the ceiling light in the kitchen, warping slightly like it was being stretched too thin. That is when I walked outside. Every house on the block had its lights strung up. Same colors. Same plastic ghosts bobbing in the wind. One neighbor waved at me. "Got your candy ready?" he said. "It's almost time." "That you can SETI and." "Time for what?" I asked. He blinked at me like I had asked him to repeat the alphabet backwards. Then he smiled and said, "You know, trick or treat. It gets dark quick. They exist for watching." I walked down to the store, just to check. It was open, lit up, like always. The bell chiming when I stepped in. But when I looked through the glass window by the soda fridge, I froze. There was someone standing behind the counter. Same uniform. Same hair. Same expression I must have had 20 seconds earlier. It was me, stocking the shelves, handing out change, blinking slow, like time moved differently in there. I turned around and walked right back out. That night, the wind picked up, and I sat in the dark trying to piece things together. The calendar, the voice, the copy of me in the store. I unplugged every radio and every light, but that same sentence kept playing somewhere close. Stay safe this Halloween night. The dak dat. The voice followed me from room to room. I covered the mirrors, turned off the breakers, but when I looked out my bedroom window, the same children were walking by again. Same pace, same turn of the head, same bag drop. I stayed up until dawn. Then I woke up again, and the radio said, "Today is October 31st. I ran. I didn't pack a bag, didn't grab my phone, just bolted out the front door and down the street. But every road curved back toward the same place. The wooden sign at the edge of town that read, "Welcome to Willow Town, founded 1889. No matter where I turned, I ended up right there. Same clouds overhead, same smell of dry leaves, same hollow, reddish light, like the sun was stuck behind the same patch of sky. The sign never changed, just stood there like a gate I couldn't walk through. I knocked on doors. All of them. The people answered, always smiling, always warm. "You're late again," they said. Or, "You missed the best part." One old man offered me candy from a cracked bowl, but when I looked down, the wrappers were covered in dust. I asked what time it was. Every person said, "Almost dark. Better turn your light on soon." When they not presses, I stopped asking. The days did not change, but my body did. I grew tired. My voice went raw. I tried to sleep through it once, thought maybe skipping the whole thing would break the loop, but I still woke up to the same voice. Stay safe this Halloween night. Is no one. Eventually, I stopped checking the clock. I stopped trying to eat or talk to anyone. I only counted steps. Counted how many houses I could pass before hearing that phrase again. Then I went home. Not because I wanted to, but because it was the only place that didn't change. My porch still creaked in the same spot. The curtains still swayed from a draft I could never find. I sat on the couch, turned on the television, and froze. It was me. On the screen, a man holding a camera, breathing hard, filming himself in a mirror. My voice, my face, eyes wide with confusion, lips moving too fast to form words. Behind me, in the reflection, were children in costumes, their faces wrong somehow, like masks that had been worn too long. 3 knocks came at my real door. I did not move. On screen, I watched myself turn and walk toward the door. At the same time, I heard the creak of the floor under my feet. I reached for the doorknob in the video. And in my house, my real hand reached too. I opened the door. Outside, the street was glowing orange from porch lights. Children laughed. Leaves tumbled by. My own breath fogged the air in front of me. The radio whispered again, low and steady, from nowhere I could place. "Welcome to Halloween in Willow Town." That was the moment I realized I was no longer sure who I was in the scene. The one watching, or the one repeating. I've tried to outlast the loop, stayed awake for what felt like days, tried to count each hour, but the moment I blink, the same sky returns, the same voice plays, the same calendar stares from the wall. I do not know how many times I have lived this day. I do not know if I am the first who has. But if you are hearing this on the 31st of October, if the sky outside has not shifted, if your clocks refuse to move, if the voice on your radio coughs at the end of the weather report, then I am still here. And so are you. I just wanted to make a film about fading traditions. That was all. Something quiet, thoughtful, maybe even beautiful in its own way. I never expected anything strange. It was supposed to be our closing piece. Me, Sharon, and Luke, a three-person crew, traveling Appalachian towns, collecting stories for a documentary series. In October last year, we chose Mason Hollow as our final stop. From what we read, the town hadn't celebrated Halloween since 2012. No lights, no costumes, no candy, just silence. On the drive up, we caught a signal on the old radio in our van. It crackled in and out like static at first, but eventually it settled into a short loop, a soft chorus, almost cheerful, "Happy Halloween from the mountain." No DJ, no station ID, just that line over and over. Sharon joked it felt like something out of a Cold War broadcast. I didn't laugh. Online maps listed Mason Hollow as closed to public access, not blocked off or condemned. Just a quiet little note beneath the search result. I figured it meant the town had low population or limited roads. Still, we drove in without issue. The place looked empty. Houses stood with their curtains drawn. Signs faded under wind and rain. Streetlights flickered half-lit like they hadn't been maintained in years. We parked along what had once been the main street, just past a diner with papered-up windows and a rusted bike still chained outside. I remember Sharon pulling out her mic as soon as we stepped out. We started filming. Luke handled the drone, sweeping overhead shots of the hills, while Sharon interviewed me on camera about our goals for the piece. The sky was soft with cloud cover, and the trees were peaking orange, red, and bone-dry yellow. The wind picked up often, carrying dry leaves across the pavement like they were being herded. At the end of the road, there was a church. Small, whitewashed, and just barely holding together. A long banner still clung to the side in fraying loops, reading, "Festival of Lanterns. Cancelled." The corners flapped like wings in the breeze. Luke muttered that it felt too quiet, even for a ghost town. Then his drone feed started acting strange. He called us over, pointing to the screen. Blurry orange dots moved along the ridgeline north of town, slow at first, then pausing, then shifting again. We thought it might be hikers, or fireflies, though it was too early and too cold for them. The dots pulsed in a steady rhythm. Sharon tilted her head. "It's following the beat of the radio." Anyway, she was right. The drone feed synced, flicker for flicker, with the old loop still playing in our van, "Happy Halloween from the mountain." We watched the lights get closer. That night, we camped in the van outside the church. None of us said it, but we felt safer parking somewhere that still had electricity. The church door was unlocked. We went in, left our gear inside, and decided to rest in shifts. The lights on the mountain moved again, closer, slower. Then they stopped completely, a perfect ring of soft orange along the tree line, just visible from the church windows. None of us said anything for a long time. Then Sharon picked up something on her mic. Laughter, distant, childlike, twisting in with the wind. And under it, something like humming, a melody none of us recognized. She turned the gain up. The sound came again. Luke zoomed the camera toward the ridge and went still. He didn't say what he saw, but I leaned over his shoulder and saw it too. Hundreds of figures, standing perfectly still, each holding a small orange lantern. Then lightning flashed, and every light went out. We didn't speak, just grabbed what we could and ran back toward the van. The headlights flickered as we climbed in, then blinked out for a few seconds before humming back to life. When I turned the key, the engine sputtered like it had been asleep for days. We tried to leave, but the main road was washed out. A mudslide or something like it had cut a ragged edge into the asphalt, just enough to stop us cold. I checked my phone. No signal. Sharon suggested staying the night in the church. I did not argue. We brought our gear inside and bolted the door. The church still had power. Fluorescent bulbs buzzed overhead, harsh but comforting. The windows were too high to see through clearly, but the wind kept brushing against them, rhythmic like breath. Luke pulled up the drone footage on his laptop. He scrubbed backward, looking for the moment the lights shifted. At first, I saw only darkness and a few trees swaying. Then something else appeared. Faint orange flickers descending the hill. I leaned in. The lights were not drifting like fire or torchlight. They were steady, moving with purpose, and they were coming toward the church. We shut the laptop. None of us said anything after that. We unrolled our sleeping bags behind the altar, pretending it was enough. The light overhead glowed warm for a moment before flickering blue. Then I heard footsteps. Not inside. Not yet. Just around the building. Circling. Slow. Steady. The floor creaked under my palms even though no one was moving. Sharon said, "Maybe it's local patrol. Someone making rounds." Duwajay. I wanted to believe her. But then all the lights outside came on at once. Orange. Every single one. Ringing the church like candles around a birthday cake. They pulsed once. Then again. We did not go to the windows. We could see their light stretching across the floor, casting long shadows against the pews. One moved. Then another. When lightning flashes, we brace. But this time, when it flashes, the shadows stay. They hold. They breathe. But no one is there. Luke picks up the camera again and records the altar. Something floats into frame. Small. Glowing. A single orange lantern drifting down from the ceiling like a leaf in reverse. It stops above the altar, suspended by nothing. Then the radio in Sharon's pack turns on by itself. The voice is clear now. Not a loop. Not static. "Thank you for coming. Now everyone is here. Date up 10 today." The radio dies. We do not speak. We do not run. By morning, the town is silent again. No lights. No footprints. Just our van, parked where we left it. But the engine is dead, and the equipment is shattered. One memory card remains, resting beside the altar like someone placed it there. Police found the van later that week. Said it must have been vandals or a storm. We never gave them a full explanation. But now, every year, on October 31st, someone reports a strange radio signal in the mountains. Happy Halloween from the mountain. Is no Wabia formation. No one knows where it comes from. But each year it spreads a little farther. And each year, one more town turns out their lights. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I truly mean that. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss the next ones. And once again, thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight.